Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this weekend for another fireside session brought to you by PakLaunch. My name is Amir Mehdi and I will be hosting this Connect tonight from Singapore. PakLaunch has had the privilege of regularly bringing in distinguished guests from a variety of different sectors. We take a lot of pride in being an exclusive community of talented Pakistani investors, entrepreneurs, and professionals who are brought together regularly to share knowledge and explore opportunities. We are already almost 2,500 members strong in a relatively short span of time. And every week, every month, this is increasing at a remarkable rate. This weekend, again, we will be talking to a group of inspiring young founders who are out on a mission. They are busting the myths around integration of specially abled people in our society. Today, these trailblazers will be talking to us about their startup called DeafTawk, which is a venture that envisions to empower the deaf community by unlocking means to communicate, leveraging technology. We will be talking to their CEO, Ali Shabbar, their CTO, Wamiq Hasan, and their COO, Abdul Qadeer, all of who will be joining us from Pakistan. We'll be listening to their stories, we'll be listening to their aspirations and ambitions. As always, this is intended to be a participative session, so please feel free to type in your questions, your comments in the chat box. And as the conversation progresses, we'll try our best to include them in. Before we start and introduce the guests, we will make we'll start with a very short 1-minute video to set the tone, and then I will introduce our guests to you. Okay.
समाअतों के झरने से ला ताल्लुक, जिंदगी खामोश और लामानी, बेरुखी के बंद दरवाजों के पीछे हैं कितने ख्वाब दफन, हैं कितनी आवाजें अनसुनी, लेकिन खामोश जिंदगी अब बोलेगी, मुस्कुराहटों की जुबान अब सुनेगी, इजहार को मिलेगा एक अंदाज अपना, अनसुनी ख्वाहिशें होंगी एतमाद से भरपूर, जिंदगी अब मुस्कुराएगी और लफ्ज बातें करेंगे. DeafTawk, future is inclusive.
Okay, wonderful. So this was just to set the tone a little bit for our conversation. Without much further ado, I'd like to introduce our guests tonight. We have Ali Shabbar and Wamiq, who are together in the screenshot with us. They are the CEO and the CTO of DeafTawk. And we also have Abdul Qadeer, AQ, who is their Chief Operating Officer. So let's start. Gentlemen, Ali and Hassan, maybe we start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. Where do you guys hail from? How did you meet? And maybe a quick icebreaker introduction.
First of all, thank you, Amir Bhai and Ali Bhai, for hosting us, and PakLaunch for giving us that platform. And wherever the audience are now listening to us, I am Ali Shabbar, and with Wamiq is my eyes because I'm blind by and us, it's AQ. AQ, can you tell us about yourself? I guess AQ has some technical issues. So AQ is blind too, and he's looking after the operations side of DeafTawk. And that's why we believe that we are a team which brings together to bridge the communication gap for the deaf community, because we belong to that community. We understand the pain points and the problems of that particular niche. And that's why we switch our lucrative careers from multinational organizations or corporates and started working on that particular domain in order to empower deaf community.
Great. I thought maybe it was a communist. We lost your voice signal a little bit. I'm not sure if it was network on my end or was it for everybody. But just in case somebody like me missed a few words, Ali and AQ are both blind, and Wamiq is deaf. So, I mean, this is, again, one of these amazing things, and we'll talk more about it shortly. And together, these three are running their co-founded startup of DeafTawk. So, Ali, let's maybe you and Wamiq, and I ask you first, just while checking if AQ is back with us online, tell us the story about how did you come up with the idea of DeafTawk? What is the inspiration behind it, and what was that sequence of events that led you to co-found something like this?
Surely. Before starting how we initiate this whole initiative, I would ask Wamiq to explain his own story, how he convinced us to start with.
Okay, so I'm deaf by birth, and I was in Pakistan in 1999. And at that time, we didn't have an interpreter. So it was really hard for me to continue my education without an interpreter. So the teacher and principal said that I cannot continue my education without an interpreter. And that's why my parents and I decided to move to the US for sign language facility. With the help of interpreter, I was able to complete my computer engineering, even though I took 15 years to complete my computer engineering and returned to Pakistan, only to realize that 10 million deaf people in Pakistan were still facing this particular challenge. And not everyone preferred to go to the US like me. So the three of us had decided to come up with this platform to empower the deaf community so they can have an access to quality education, health, and employment opportunities, and they can take a full and effective participation in the society. So that's how we came up with the idea, and we are implementing it.
Yeah, so that's the main Rudolph factor. We met Wamiq in 2013 when he returned to Pakistan, and he joined Telenor at that time. So moving that whole story a bit faster, it became 2017 now, and we became very good friends. We understand the whole pain points of Wamiq. In 2017, all mobile network operators were focusing on digital revolution and digitalization of their own ecosystems. We thought it's a good chance for us to involve the inclusion aspects in the digitalization. As I'm looking after the flagship program called Khuddar, Pakistan for Persons with Disabilities, AQ is looking after the regulatory affairs, so he has a strong connection with PTA and Ministry of IT. So with the joint venture of Ministry of IT, Telenor, we launched a program called Mobile App Awards in 2017. And the basic purpose for that whole program was to develop certain mobile applications which give day-to-day benefits to persons with disabilities. For example, for blind people, it can be a screen reader or note recognition application. For wheelchair users, they can move their wheelchair through an eyeball. So there are a lot of applications being developed. Around more than 256 applications we got, out of which 51 applications being shortlisted, and top 5 applications being awarded by 1 million cash grant, 1 million Pakistan rupees cash grant by Mr. Wamiq Hasan, who was the president of that time. And me and AQ was on the stage and over the moon that, oh, we did a great job. Now we can have a Employee of the Month, maybe some international tour. But when we stepped down the stage, Wamiq was there, tears in the eyes, and started yelling on both of us that you both are my best friends. Out of 256 applications in top 50 or in 5, nothing for the deaf. Why? And that shocked us as well, why it was, because we didn't have that answers. As me and AQ both studied from Pakistan, I did my MS in supply chain management from Qadir University. And AQ did his master's from Punjab University, though he's the gold medalist, he's the more intellectual among us. And Wamiq is the only deaf in Pakistan who did the software engineering because he went to US. How many deaf people can went to? There we decided, no, now we have to work for that community and started implementing that dreams that how we can contribute in it. We talked with different stakeholders, but unfortunately didn't get a very positive response. But we applied on one of the programs called National Incubation Center from Ministry of IT. We got shortlisted, got a call from there, and then we went to pitch. As Wamiq is my eyes, he told me that it's a jazz office. And if we've been selected, jazz will fund us. And there we pitched very strongly just to have that idea that might just select that idea and find us for that whole implementation of it. Finally, with the grace of Allah, we got selected. And when we got the selection letter, we immediately put Rizan in Telenor in a Rajnikant style because we thought that it's both our competitors. We have to select one ship. So we selected that. But when we entered in NIC, it was a shocking news at that time that they don't fund us, they don't fund the ideas. They polished and developed a proven business model and mentor us to scale globally. Though initially it sounds very rubbish to us, or we just finished our lucrative careers and all jobs, but eventually it gave us fruits now because it gave us a conviction to work with. And that's how in the last 3 years of our operations, we started from Pakistan back in 2018, scaled to Singapore, launching these services in Sri Lankan market. We have more than 20,000 active users, 120,000 hours of sign language has been rendered. Monthly recurring revenue is around $40,000. So things are moving on the positive side.
Wonderful, wonderful. I love your comment about the Rajnikant style resignation. I'm sure many of us would like to do that, but I'm glad that it worked out well for you. I just wanted to address one, these days everybody wants to be sympathetic, but also wants to be a bit careful about how these things work. So I thought I'll take this one head on. Now, I mean, no doubt it is inspirational, right? That all three of you are specially abled. Two of you are blind, one is deaf. You just shared the story of how you came about with DeafTawk. I'm very curious, how do the three of you work together? I mean, how do you communicate? And you just mentioned, Wamiq is your eyes. We heard Wamiq talk. I hear he's also a lip reader and a bit of a Superman in that way. But just describe for us, how do you guys communicate? I mean, starting something up and running it is not an easy task.
Oh, that's a secret sauce, but definitely we'll explain. Wamiq used to lip read. So when we need to communicate, either it's a now common ethics in our office that we have to speak slowly and in English. So Wamiq can read the lips and understand the whole conversation, either if there is sign language interpreter or not. If there is a sign language interpreter with him, we can go with the flow. But if there isn't a sign language interpreter, which sometimes happens, but we have to speak slowly so he can read the lips and communicate with us. On the other side, he can speak, but sometimes we need to language. So AQ and me, we both know sign language. We can communicate with Wamiq in sign language as well.
Also, I spent 15 years in the US, so my preference, the language is English, so it's easy for me than speaking in Urdu. So, yeah.
So
Ali, I also want to add, Wamiq has trained us about the American sign language. So whenever we want to communicate with the Wamiq, mostly we use the signs and he understands what we are talking.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Wonderful. So now I think with that out of the way, it still is a bit of a wonder for someone like me. As I was talking to you guys before this, and even now listening to you, there's a bit of a discovery, right? That even sign language, which many of us assume is universal, perhaps, it's not universal. It's different for different parts of the world. It's different for different nationalities or dialects. And then that is a level of detail. We'll probably talk about it in a minute within the DeafTawk context. I think the natural segue that I want to create now is to talk what DeafTawk is really about. But before we go to AQ and ask him to explain that model a little bit to us, I thought we will play another one of a very well-made video, which touches the emotional chords as well as it explains how DeafTawk really fulfills its vision of using technology to enable communication for the deaf community. I'll just make that segue now, go on mute and run the video. And then we'll come back and we'll talk to AQ in a couple of minutes.
The language barrier is undoubtedly the biggest hurdle for social communications and means of earning at all times, but modern life's technology development has brought a lot of opportunities for bridging this gap. Do you know that 466 million people in the world have hearing disability, and out of which 9 million people are in Pakistan? Deaf people have to communicate in sign language and are left behind in the race of life due to the lack of interpreters. In 2018, DeafTawk started as a raw idea and came up with a solution to ensure full and effective participation of the deaf community. In the year 2019, DeafTawk collaborated with Garantco, which proved to be a significant help in the initiating process towards bridging the gap by introducing a mobile application. This app is aimed towards making communication easy and effective to help improving the overall quality of life and provide equal work opportunities. On the mission to provide a complete and extensive service, DeafTawk conducted 15 sign language trainings, 10 awareness drives in different cities of Pakistan, onboarded 422 certified sign language interpreters, successfully registered 9,732 deaf users, and through effective and wide-ranging digital campaigns delivered the message of inclusion to more than 2 million people. Team DeafTawk also organized 5 consultative workshops and collaborated with multiple organizations so the businesses and services can be made inclusive. With the support of Garantco, till now, DeafTawk has rendered 500,000 minutes of service to its 19,500 plus users from both Pakistan and Singapore, and have a pool of 1,100 plus interpreters, and provides the service not only in PSL but in 6 different languages. This service not only helped the user but 28 plus businesses to tap the 5% population. On average, 92 plus calls daily from hospitals have been facilitated during COVID-19, saving the life of many deaf people, as well as 700 plus getting employment and 112 getting the chance to complete their higher education for the first time. In addition, it became the source of income for 1,100 sign language interpreters, as well as deaf people organizations. Partnership with Garantco not only impacted the lives of thousands of deaf people, but also became a sustainable business opportunity to get international and national level recognition. This strong collaboration made a very fruitful and influential impact in such a short time, but the movement has just started to empower 500 million deaf communities across the globe.
Wow, some big statistics out there. I mean, for one, it was a big shock, I would say, for someone like me, that there are 466 million people around the world with either a partial or full hearing disability. Of course, some of the numbers that we just saw about DeafTawk and the kind of impact you're already making, both on the commercial aspects as well as in the lives of all these people. Let's talk about that a little bit with this video as the segue. I'll go to you now, AQ. Tell us a little bit about your operating and business models. I mean, we've heard the story on how you came into being. We now understand through these videos roughly how the user uses these apps. But what is your operating model and what is your business model? Talk to us about that a little bit, please.
Yes, thank you so much. So in the videos, you see that we started with a very initial. We started our operation while using WhatsApp video calling solution and Zoom in the very start to check how our services will begin. So at that time we have 20 to 30 users and 4 to 5 interpreters. When the things goes up, we decided to have a mobile app so that we can shift that traffic and to facilitate maximum deaf users. So when we developed that app, within 3 months, the ratio and the demand of the deaf users has increased to 40 to 5,000 users. So we have made that model very simple for the deaf user with the different packages. On the one hand, there is a deaf person, and on the other hand, there is a interpreters. Is audio video call, and whenever a deaf person want to communicate with the doctor, even he's in a hospital or going for an interview, the interpreter will come online, and whatever the deaf person say in signs, the interpreter translate into the voice, and same voice with the voice into the signs. So uh, the model for us is two different models. One is B2C, that is deaf user and interpreter, and one is B2B. For B2C, we are charging from our deaf user on per minute basis and paying back to the interpreters, because the motivation of the interpreter is based on their services. We consider ourselves to be a Uber of the deaf community, because we are bridging this gap for the deaf person, and in this way our business model works.
Excellent. So it's like so Uber of the deaf community. I would say you're referring to a marketplace. Ali, anything you want to further build on the description AQ gave us on the operating model?
Yeah, as AQ rightly positioned ourselves that we are the Ubers for sign language interpreters of the community, whereas we position for B2B as a software as a service, because we charge on a monthly subscription model. And it's a 5% of the untapped population by the businesses. It's just an imagine when me and Wamiq went to Singapore on the early stage, all the banks, I'm giving the exact number, at least 6 banks refused to open our bank accounts because I'm blind and Wamiq is deaf. And there are 500,000 deaf in Singapore. So after winning a SRF award, which is Singapore International Foundation Award, which has been funded by DBS Foundation, we asked from DBS Foundation to start these services. And in just last 6 months, DBS has opened 3,000 plus accounts for the deaf users. So it's one of the niche market which businesses not been incorporated. Every would love to have great burgers, pizza, either going to the cinema halls for entertainment. So business now needs to incorporate that a huge segment in their services as well.
Very clear. Okay, we've also started seeing some questions in the chat pane, so I'll just try and bring them into the flow of the conversation. Let's ask that more cliched one here, gentlemen. I would really love to know from each one of you, what have been some of the big challenges you've faced from conceiving the idea to where you have brought it today? We saw some very good numbers in terms of how many interpreters certified you have, how many deaf users have already signed up. There is an ARR already. You have a not a bad number for recurring revenue as well. Talk to us a little bit about the challenges or anything that stands out as one big one. Maybe Wamiq, I ask you to start and then hand off to Ali and AQ.
Okay, the first challenge that we faced during the inception of DeafTawk was that we didn't know the business model and how to run because it was the first time doing it. However, we faced multiple challenges, which include the lack of supply of the interpreter side. Because without interpreter, we were not able to provide the deaf community the services. Also, before the development of the application, we used Facebook, Google, and Skype to help people to communicate with our interpreter which we had in-house. So that's one of the challenges that we have to face initially. And there are many other challenges that Mr. Ali can mention.
Yes, as Wamiq rightly said so, because priorly we didn't have the idea to how to organize or implement a business because we consider ourselves to be a good employee rather than a good employer or a business or an entrepreneur. So in last 3 years, we learned how to run a business. What are the key aspects of the operation, the key aspects of fundraising. So that's we learn and pivot ourselves. In the meantime, our key is and go-to-market part is our customer feedback. Whatever our customer suggests, we pivot towards that need because eventually we have to serve that part. As Wamiq has highlighted certain challenges like limited supply of sign language interpreters. That's one bigger challenge current as well because demand is huge. Almost every corner of the world we are receiving very lucrative opportunities and they are calling us start their operation in their own regions. But again, supply side is one of the lacuna to scale globally. But I hope through VoIP and AI machine learning part, it can easily bridge that. On the other side is that people or investor part side, because they are still believing that we are in fact startup or it's a charity-based part. And we have to convince them it's a strong business proposition because we are earning our gross margin at least 40%.
I think we lost the audio stream from Ali. Maybe you can step in while they come back.
Yes, as early as Wamiq has told much about the challenges, but further to that, the biggest challenge that we are currently facing is the connectivity issue because the users that we have are almost from our metropolitan cities, but the 40 to 50% population living in the rural areas do not have the smartphone and they do not access our services. So this is the one more challenge that we have, but we are working on it, that how we can give them services and include in the society because there is another barrier for the deaf community. Apart from that, when we bring the users on board, the biggest problem that the deaf community is have that they demand the free services. Though our 15 to 20% users are availing our services on free of cost, but they are also demanding to include them in the society for the job opportunities and all that. So that we are working on it with the different organizations, but these are the few challenges that we are facing from our users side and about our technology.
Thank you for that. And I mean, there are a couple of very interesting questions in the chat pane. I'll come to them in a minute once we have exhausted this line of thinking. Ali, before we lost your audio feed for a few seconds, you mentioned something interesting. I would like to hear from you a little bit more. I think it's very common in most societies, but perhaps a bit more so in ours because we're still learning those ways of integrating our specially abled. You get more sympathy and more charity kind of responses versus being treated with equality as you started to grow this and create this as a business. I think that's what you referred to. Talk to us about that a little bit more. I mean, maybe with an example or two. And very keen to know how you dealt with that. How did you change these people's minds or their perception, which could be a bit stereotypical at times?
Yeah, rather than we speak, our numbers speaks. When we share our statistics with different investors, they have a direct impact on that part because, as I was explaining earlier, our gross margin, in fact, as I was saying, at least 20% we are giving a free service. Still there, we are receiving at least a 40% of gross margin. And this is one of the higher margins in the online market space because usually if we talk about the online market spaces, it's around 20 to 25%. So we are 15% ahead. On the other side, it can easily be positioned for B2B part as well, which has much higher margins. So if we add the AI part, because nowadays over 60% of the gross margin goes towards this interpreter cost. And if we adopt the AI module, that automatically reduce at least 40%. So gross margin will raise up to 80%. So these are some statistics which definitely put towards the strong business case. On the other side, if we talk about the global market size, it's 34 billion currently, where many players are not being part of it. It's just a traditional based model. And after taking the example of DeafTawk, few international players such as Talk or Khuddar are now moving towards that space. I hope this market share will increase, and we would love to acquire at least minimum 20% by end of this decade. We can be automatic a unicorn.
Why not? Why not? All right, we have a very interesting point, and you know, not to say it's controversial, but I think it's going to perhaps broaden the field of view on this topic a little bit. You threw some impressive financial metrics in there, right? About gross margin, about letting the robustness of the business model talk for itself. According to WHO, and these are, I mean, rough statistics, and I think even without those stats, we know that especially in countries like Pakistan, India, the emerging countries, a very big proportion of people suffering from this disability are already struggle to get integrated. They are jobless. They are under economic challenges, viability wise and morality wise. Okay, and I tread this subject with a bit of caution. How do you respond if somebody says, is it fair to charge a person who's already struggling to make ends meet, and while the whole mission is to enable them to integrate, we understand the business part of it, but should they be charged for this? Wouldn't it be their right? And how do the commercial aspects stack up from the more societal or the moral aspects of this domain?
Our USP is we charge per minute basis. So at least anyone can afford ₹1 per minute. That's how we evaluate. If it's giving ₹1 per minute, it's break even for us, and we are happy to facilitate that user. On the other side, we know that community has ample amount of money to spend on the luxuries, such as dining out on a daily basis, choosing a very expensive branded garments. So why not they spend on their needs? It's just developing a specific segment that you can easily ₹500 per, not a very high value in the current arena or current unit economics. Everybody can easily afford per month ₹500, and out of that 40% is the gross margin. But we totally understand, as AQ was explaining, 70% of the population lives in the rural area where the unit economics is much low. Over there, we love to facilitate them on the break even. At least these numbers can help us to bridge the B2B side of it. And through that B2B engagement can help us to raise our margins as well as the services to that particular segment.
Great. Unit economics, a very key word you mentioned. And I think this debate you guys will follow, right? Because as you go bottom of the pyramid, as you increase penetration, you reach the other socioeconomic strata. These questions will keep coming up, right? We noticed that you're currently active in a couple of countries with completely different economic paradigms, Singapore and Pakistan. And perhaps that point of income inequality is a bit more pronounced in Pakistan versus a more first world economy. Tell us how you balance these unit economics, right? Some of the numbers you've shared, when you look at your future expansion plans as well, how do you see this playing out? Is there going to be a strategy of maximizing the commercials on one end, but then subsidizing the unit economics elsewhere? Or do you foresee this to be more of a free market kind of a pricing model?
Yes. First of all, tell me, Amar bhai, do you have a magic ball in front of you? How do you know that? That's our key strategy. Yes, earning from the developing economies such as Singapore, European markets, US, and reflecting back to the developing economies such as Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Far East Asian countries like Cambodia or Indonesia, where unit economics are not as proficient or as specific as Singapore or developing economies have in currently. So that's one key that we are following. But on the other hand, we are, because if you talk about developing economies, the number of units sold or GMV is pretty low because the you can say the population segment size is pretty low, whereas these economies have much higher population size. So here we also adopt B2B segment of it. B2B is one of encourage that making services and tapping that 5%. That benefit during the COVID part, because in that COVID we pivot that part or improvise that strategy of B2B as well.
Okay, wonderful. And B2B, I think it was an interesting aspect for me, right? Because you normally, when you look at the animations, you look at the ads, you see the B2C aspect. There's an interpreter, there's somebody who needs that. But B2B is how do you see the pie change over time, right? And it would obviously be different for different markets, but pretty much every consumer-facing, customer-facing sector, as the awareness grows, as the need grows, they will be an attractive market for a solution like this, right? So where does the pie stand today for you? And how do you see it developing in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years as a proportion between B2B and B2C?
Oh, these are the early stages currently for us. To be very honest, we just less than 1% we adopt that pie. We have just developing our business, proven business model and product fit for the market. As AI will be developing in this year, so that will be a product fit for us, hopefully. And then it's a huge 9x scale factor for us then to go globally. So as we earlier said, by the end of this decade, we would love to acquire at least 20% of that whole market share of $34 billion, which will improve as well. But at least 20% we would love to target across the globe, because currently we are receiving a lot of attraction across the globe, either it's US, either it's Canada. And this month, we will be launching our services in the European part, which is Netherlands and Denmark. We have been onboarded the European interpreters. So that's, we positioned ourselves that in at least in a decade, we have to acquire 20% of the global market share.
Excellent. We have a question from one of our attendees. Maybe I just route it to AQ, and then any one of you can build on top. What percentage of the deaf community in Pakistan today, according to your estimates, has access to the DeafTawk app? How do you plan to increase this coverage? And then attached to that, what are your thoughts about automating the interpreter bit versus the more human interface today?
Yeah, currently in Pakistan, we have only 19,000 users. So the total population in Pakistan is 9 million. So if we come about the percentage is almost 0.3 to 4% are users on our mobile app. But we are building this platform to at least acquire 20 to 30% deaf users on our mobile app, so that we can give them our services, because the demand is so much high from the deaf user. The challenge that we have faced, that Ali and Wamiq has mentioned, is the supply side. We are also building that supply side to at least accommodate this 30 to 40% that we have in our mind that we have to achieve in this year. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, we just changed the tact a little bit, and I'll bring back the human element into this later. But while staying on the operating model and the business model, Wamiq, talk to us very briefly about your tech roadmap. So we already see that you're using a marketplace and a good app. There was mention of availability of smartphones in certain sectors of the society. That could be one of the challenges. So in the next, let's say, 6 months to a couple of years, what is your tech roadmap focusing on? How are you trying to address these challenges? Are you talking about bringing in any other technology elements which may not be visible today on your app?
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, I'm looking after the tech team. So initially, we have collected 40,000 of recorded caption. So what we will have to create the data set and feed it into the AI machine learning path. So we have an avatar that can translate into sign language. Not on that, but we are also integrating the VoIP, which we are expecting to launch by September 2021. So not only that, but we also have group calling features, which means people from other numbers can also join. So that's a bonus for the one interpreter to facilitate many deaf people at the same time. Also, for the VoIP, I think it's one of the best features because a lot of organizations like banking sectors or hospitals, they use the landline because they don't have a mobile application to connect with the deaf user. So that's why VoIP is one of the key factors in the mobile application that we are planning to launch by September. So we are also gathering a survey from the deaf community so they can express what kind of features that they want in the application that will be easy for them. So we can actually try to put these features in a mobile application. So that's part of my job to make sure that the deaf application can facilitate deaf people to the full capacity. So that's that.
Thank you very much. I mean, Caesar is going to be keeping you and your tech teams busy for some time to come. Let's switch the gears a little bit towards the more human side of this. We are very keen to cite maybe one or two examples of how DeafTawk to date has changed lives. Maybe something without necessarily mentioning names. How have you brought change into people's lives through the adoption of this app, and also how are you going to be bringing in people in the workforce that were previously deemed unemployable, either within DeafTawk or using DeafTawk as an enabler?
Well, if we talk about the holistic numbers, in 3 years of operations, around 94,000 plus deaf community being benefited directly or indirectly, either from directly using DeafTawk services or from B2B part. Whereas 750 plus deaf community got employment through using DeafTawk services, like they went to for the interview, job interview, switch on our services, and whatever the employer is asking, our interpreters is responding as per the answers set to by the deaf users. So that's how, and among 750, around 60% of females who require that job, 60 deaf females. More importantly, the number is not very high, but 112 deaf people has been enrolled first time in the history of Pakistan for higher education. Now people like Wamiq don't need to fly to US for the quality education. They can be accountants, they can be engineers, and they can be any professional field by acquiring any good professional education in Pakistan. We facilitate usually 92 plus calls on average basis from hospitals and medical purposes, either from pharmacies or medical labs or from directly from the doctors in order to giving treatments to the deaf patients. So that's another, during COVID times, how it fulfill the requirements of health access to health. As you rightly mentioned, that direct employment opportunities, like AQ mentioned, currently we have 1,100 active sign language interpreters who are in Pakistan who are earning around 25 to 30,000 rupees per month by just giving 3 to 4 hours a day as a part-time higher income, just sitting at home or in office, communicate. In Singapore, the interpreters can easily earn $1,200 to $1,500 per month. So it's an extra mileage of income by sitting at home. So it's a win-win situation for us, for deaf community, for interpreters as well. And businesses, yes.
Wonderful. All right. before we try to draw this towards a close and get some closing thoughts on the expectations, what are your global expansion plans, Ali? So I think you alluded to them briefly, but we heard about a few new markets. You mentioned Europe just now a few minutes ago. There was talk of Sri Lanka earlier. So I mean, what is your roadmap to global expansion, and how do you see that in the context of penetration in big markets versus expanding globally? How are you balancing those two different dimensions of growth?
Well, to be very honest, Wamiq always gave us that direction by saying that we would love to be the Google translator for the deaf community across that. So as soon as AI and VoIP services have been integrated, there is no issue for us to scale globally. With current perspective of current model of operations, we are focused on partnership development, where we get a local good partner who provides us the interpreters and develop our unit economics there. We are happy to scale. So as we engage dialogue in Sri Lanka, for scaling in European market, we have Frank at the backs who help us to scale in Denmark and the Netherlands markets. So we are seeking for that part. In Turkey, we got this Benchi Foundation who partnered with us to launch their services in September in Turkish market. So that's how we are adopting it. Even in South Africa, we got MTN as a partner now. And in Egypt, it's a group called I Love Coffee. It's a coffee chain who would love to partner with DeafTawk because all baristas are deaf over there. They said it's a win-win situation. So in that scenarios, we are developing partners and providing our platforms as license to them to operate in the local context.
Excellent. Okay. Now, we've talked a little bit about, of course, the emotional aspect, the social aspect, and the business side. One of the questions which I think in the sequence, which probably just completes that aspect of operating model, is you use the word Uber and marketplace. So for someone who may not be able to translate what Uber does for the transportation industry, could you just elaborate? That is the question that we have in the chat pane here. You use the word scalable and Uber for the deaf people. Just talk a little bit more, elaborate on what does that mean and how are the two comparable both for scalability and as a marketplace?
Yeah, what Uber does, Uber provides users a car with a driver at their own doorstep on just one click away. That's what we do. We provide interpreters to the deaf users on just one click away. In the same way, Uber acquire local cars at the different market segments. That's what we do. We require local interpreters because every country has its own language as well as sign language. In Pakistan, we have Pakistan language. In Sri Lanka, we have Tamil and Sri Lanka sign language. In Singapore, we have English and Chinese sign language and Malay because Malay is the official language of Singapore. So we require local interpreters to facilitate the local or regional aspects of the user needs. So that's why we position ourselves as the Uber for sign language interpreters. So Uber provides local cars, we provide local interpreters on just one click away. And as the second part is the Google. Why Google? Google is mostly based on AI. So there is no human element. When we talk about Google Translator, no human is translating, just AI and predictive models is translating. That's our future will be. Through AI machine learning, human operator force will be reduced and more burden will be on the AI bot.
Awesome, thank you for that. One quick question, and probably with that we'll draw towards a close, is have you received any attention from the government bodies, the Ministry of Science and Technology, the Prime Minister's office, in terms of offering support either as funding or any other means to further the development and rollout? Is that something you've experienced, or any comments around that?
To be honest, in Pakistan currently now, yes, but internationally in Singapore, we received a lot of acknowledgement, and we are partnering with SG Enable, which is a government part, in order to facilitate the deaf users there. So government of Singapore will pay for it, and we facilitate to the deaf users. Similarly, that model will be replicated in the European market because There they have a strong social protection system for the deaf community or persons with disability. But still we are struggling in Pakistan, but we are very hopeful to knock that doors or open that doors very sooner, because we are all continuously knocking that power corridors of SRs program, as well as babies in income support program and other Ministry of IT to channelize their social protection programs or social welfare programs to those deaf communities who are from the rural area, who cannot afford a good smartphone. So we can just provide them a good smartphone and they connect with the interpreter and their lives can be changed.
Great. All right. So moving towards the close of this, I think it's you have the platform at your disposal right now. The PakLaunch.com. In the introduction we also talked about, and of course, you're familiar with a number of very distinguished high achievers, Pakistani diaspora abroad, and many of them in Pakistan as well. PakLaunch provides that exposure, that connectivity. Just articulate a bit for us, how do you want to take it forward? What PakLaunch can do to further accelerate or enable your journey? What do you have in mind for some of the people who are listening, who will watch this video on our YouTube and Facebook channels later? What are your expectations beyond this introductory session? And what can we do to contribute?
Just two simple asks we have for PakLaunch audience and diasporas, because we reviewed the website and your members are across the globe. So just connect us with them, connect us, and let's make a way that how we can launch these services in their certain countries where they are currently based now. And second is, let's join this movement in order to bridge the gap for the global deaf audience, because it's not a matter of 9 million in Pakistan, but it's a matter of 500 million deaf community across the globe. And we believe that barriers break when communication starts. So hopefully we can be the first Pakistani unicorn and bridging that communication gap for the deaf community.
Wonderful. And I mean, I think on behalf of PakLaunch, I can say Ali Fahad and his team and all of us will very much be, you've inspired us a lot today, whether it's the fundraise side, whether it's the networking, whether it's other means, we're always available to have a big or small share in this cause. Thank you so much, Ali, Wamiq, and AQ for talking to us today. I think while we have some great participants and guests over the months, and we'll have more, I think I really enjoyed it. It was a real privilege to have hosted and moderated this session. Very engaging. I think we are not only inspired, but very thankful for the torch you guys bear. Keep going. I think you have the support, well wishes, and prayers of so many behind you. There's no doubt that you will be very successful, inshallah. And also to our participants, to our audience, thank you for dialing in, wherever you dialed in from at different hours around the globe. And hopefully we see you all in the next session, next fireside session of PakLaunch in a week's time. Have a good night, good day, everybody. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you. Thank you.